Hi, kids. It's Isaiah here, and I'm hoping you're all having a good day out there at your homes. Did you know that the first day of November is what we call All Saints' Day? It's a day to remember the people who came before us, who are now in heaven. We thank God for their faith, their love, and the way that they served God while they were down here on earth where we are now. It's a reminder that the way we live here on earth matters. Every day, as you live for God, even when it's not fun or easy, you are helping to bring God's kingdom to the world. People will see the way that you live and talk and act, and they will praise God for it. So always live for God. That's what the prophet Daniel did back in the Bible. Today we're going to see how Daniel lived for God, even when the king of Babylon was doing bad things. Watch this.
Long ago, there was a beautiful city called Babylon. It was the capital of one of the greatest empires of the ancient world. More than 1 million people lived behind its towering walls and gates of polished brass. But the Babylonians worshipped idols of gold, silver, wood, and stone. And they liked to make wars with other people. Their king, Nebuchadnezzar, had a cruel army that marched in and took over the countries around them. They took those people captive and made them their servants. Some of these were from the land of Israel, and among them was a young man named Daniel. In the court of King Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel soon became a trusted helper and was even made a leader of the wise men. Through Daniel, the king came to know that there is only one God, the Lord of heaven and earth. But the Babylonians still worshipped man-made idols, and as the years passed, the Babylonians forgot about the true God and his prophet Daniel. When Belshazzar became king, he was a cruel, selfish man who thought only about having a good time. Although he was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, Belshazzar did not believe in God, and under his rule the city of Babylon was full of wickedness and sin. As Daniel saw the foolishness of the people, his heart was sad, and so he prayed and quietly waited for the time when he could again be of special service to the Lord, and that time was soon to come. For outside the walls of Babylon was the mighty army of the Medes and the Persians, led by Cyrus, king of Persia. King Belshazzar did not know how powerful the Medes and Persians were, nor how clever their plan was to capture Babylon. Belshazzar gave a great feast to honor the people's idols. 1,000 lords and ladies were summoned to attend the great banquet. The king came into the banquet hall and was greeted with shouts of acclamation. "O king, live forever," they cried, certain that the great Babylonian empire would never end. As the king took his place at the table, servants brought in huge platters heaped with food. They filled the goblets with wine again and again, and the noise and the shouts of revelry increased. He remembered the cups made of gold and silver that had been stolen years before from the temple of God at Jerusalem. "Bring the golden goblets here," he ordered. When the temple goblets were brought in, the king filled them with wine. He would show that he didn't believe in the God of Israel, even if his grandfather had worshipped him. He held his cup aloft. "Let's drink to our gods of gold, silver, brass, wood, and stone," he cried. But just as Belshazzar lifted the cup to his lips, a strange thing happened. The goblet dropped from the king's fingers. He stared at the wall before him, for a strange hand had suddenly appeared above the light of the candlestick. There were shrieks and screams of fear. Then the hand began to write words on the palace wall. "Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin." Everyone was silent as the people stared at the mysterious hand, spelling out a message that no one understood. The king's face went pale with fear. "Send for the wise men. Find someone who can tell me the meaning of the writing on the wall." But none of the fortune-tellers, magicians, astrologers, or soothsayers could explain the meaning of the strange symbols written on the wall of the palace. Still shaking, the king sat down at the long table. Surely someone could tell him where the message came from and what it meant. Then the Queen Mother came hurrying into the banquet hall. She reminded the king of Daniel, the man of wisdom and understanding, who years before had been able to interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dreams. When Daniel was hastily brought to the king, he refused the great honor and wealth Belshazzar promised him if he could read the writing. Instead, he reminded the king of his grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, who had come to realize that his great wealth and kingdoms were given to him by God, and who had worshipped the Lord in humility. But you, Belshazzar, you are proud and vain. You have not humbled yourself before the God of heaven, but have defied him. You have taken sacred vessels from God's temple, drinking wine from them and praising your dead idols. Daniel told the king that the message on the wall came from God. And this is what God says to you, Belshazzar. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. You are weighed in the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Outside, something was happening. The great enemy army of Cyrus, which had been camped outside the city for 2 years, quietly began to move. Soldiers crept into the city and opened gates. Soon the army swept down the streets. Guards were slain, but no sound of warning reached the banquet hall. Suddenly, a terror-stricken guard appeared on the steps. The enemy is in the city!" Belshazzar fled in terror before the first wave of soldiers who were already within the palace looking for him, for they knew that once the king was slain, the city would soon surrender. As Belshazzar glanced behind him, he could see he did not have a chance. The Medes were gaining on him. Harsh hands gripped him, and perhaps then Belshazzar realized that his life was being cut short and his kingdom finished because he had dared to mock God. Long before that day, Belshazzar had made his choice to live for the pleasures of this world. He had turned away from the true God to worship idols of wood and stone.
Someone has said it pays to follow Jesus. They meant that when you follow him, you have a wonderful future in heaven to look forward to. But if you do evil, only bad things can happen, as they did to Belshazzar. Well, have a good week, everyone, and God bless you.